Good morning, you guys.
Good morning. Okay.
Good morning, everybody. It's 11:03. We're here at our Board of County Commissioners regular meeting, March 21st, 2023. If I could ask everyone to please silence your phones and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence to start off the meeting.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, first on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
Can we add the veteran officer service report?
Yes.
To the,
Yep.
Reports, bills, and
You bet. This is, I think, we had,
January.
I was gonna say, I did have on my notes to add the January, but it's January 23rd and the February 23rd.
Yes.
Okay. Yep.
Aside from that, I don't have any issues with the agenda, so I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda with the addition of the January and February Veterans Affairs Office report.
I'll second.
All right, any further discussion?
None for me, thank you.
All those in favor? Aye.
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 Moving on to community informational items, Commissioner Marcella.
Just finishing some work on transit. We'll work on the final stages of working through bus stop locations, timing locations, those kinds of things. We're waiting on the capital request from the Federal Transit Authority. We should know about that by the end of the month, and then whatever that determines, then we'll be able to move forward with either purchasing a vehicle or whatever our next steps are in that process. So continuing to work on that, we were fortunate enough to have Congresswoman Pedersen visit Bright Start on Friday. And it was really great to spend some time with her at our center for about an hour, talking to her about some of our challenges and successes. And so look forward to those continued conversations with her and her staff on what we can do at the federal level to continue to make childcare a priority. So that's
Excellent.
all I've got today.
Thank you. Commissioner Fiedler?
None for me.
I'll just update, we continue to work with our Forest Health Council and land management partners to address wildfire mitigation for this season. Our emergency manager, our director, Claire, was kind enough to introduce and engage with Team Rubicon, and they were making introductions of them to other subdivisions. So that's exciting additional resource for the community. All right, moving on to commissioner clarifications. Anything? Why don't we, should we turn off the waiting room?
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah. Can do that. I don't have anything for clarifications.
Fine.
Let's see. There we go.
And then would you, can I, yeah, I'll just do that. There's a question in the chat and I can add Team Rubicon. Great. Alrighty, going into public comments on items not on the agenda. Anybody wishing to speak has 3 minutes. If you'd name, please give us your name and address. That would be great. And then any action, if required, or follow-up will be assigned to staff. Do we have any public comment
I would love to comment on something.
Yes, sir.
My name is Brandon Grosjean. I'm from the Leadville ATV dealer, or tour place here across from the Circle K, Circle R, whatever it is. I'm really bad at public speaking, so just give me a second, guys, to deal with how I talk. I heard there was something going on with some regulations that were gonna more or less just affect our business, which I don't know, because I haven't really been informed all that highly on what exactly is going on, but I just wanted to come introduce myself. A couple of our other tour guides here, and we just want to say that we love our jobs and we love Leadville. And if you guys will listen for just a second, I just want to tell a little bit about what we do at work. We're all medically trained people. I spent a ton of time in the backcountry in the wintertime and the summertime. I've dealt with wild animals and wild people and all sorts of machines breaking. I can fix anything and take care of anything. And our tours that go up through town, we think are nice and safe. We drive real slow on tours. We've been open 2 years and had no accidents. Man, we bring a ton of people into this small town, and we always invite people to go and check out a lot of the restaurants and local things, tell them to point out the mining district. And a lot of the people that come in for our tours don't even know anything about the mining district. We share a lot of the history of the town with them, and all of a sudden they're really excited to go and look in more into what Leadville has to offer. I don't even know what's really going on here today, but I haven't talked to anybody in here or know any of you guys, and you guys don't know me. So again, I just want to be personable and just say hello and let you know what we do over there is really rewarding for me personally, because I get to share my experiences and capabilities to be able to take people out there and show them a good time, but also safely. I'm not so sure everybody's safe out there in the backcountry, but I am, because I know the little problems turn into big problems out there. And we take really good care of the people that come on our tours. And again, we're spreading the love from Leadville to the people that come through our shop. So I don't know exactly what regulations aren't going to be passed here today, but I just want to let you know that we have a good time here, and I'm not going to be able to have the job that and have the life that I have here in Leadville. I just bought property in town. I'm going to try and build a house here. I don't know if that's going to be available to me anymore if I have to relocate or find another job in a different spot. I've had a few jobs here in Colorado. They don't pay as well, and they're not as comfortable. I've worked for small businesses my whole life. I've worked for a ski shop for 8 years, which had 2 locations, was a small shop. I worked for a hops farm, which was just 2 or 3 employees at that hops farm. And I can tell you, for working for Dan and Ting, are the first names of my bosses, I don't have anything bad to say about those guys. I was looking for housing. They said, come stay at our house. I said, well, I don't really want to. They're like, well, you can, okay? and they listen to anything we have at work. We say, hey, we need this personally. They listen. I haven't had that before in my life. And this job is just, I'm really happy where I'm at. And I believe if the regulations come down and are passed to shut down our business, it's going to take my job, and I'm going to be really unhappy about that. And I don't want to leave Leadville. I love it. It's home now, and I want to build the rest of my life here. So when you guys go and vote today for whatever you're voting, if it just so happen to do with our business, if you could try and keep us open, that would just be fantastic for us and for our business. So that's kind of what I have to say.
Thanks.
I don't know what that means for y'all, but.
Yeah, that's
chew on it if you
3
can.
minutes, yeah, and now the last item on the agenda, there will be time for public comment, which is what you're referring to, the ordinance
Am I in the
consideration.
wrong time for saying that? I just
No,
wanted to
That's
You're
okay,
good. You're
that's
good.
okay, there is another time.
You're good.
Do we have any other public comments? Anything online? If there's online, do your best to. So for clarification, today we have last on our agenda, item 6, and it's the second reading of the ordinance. And that is separate from also special use permitting criteria that will be further considered over the coming months. And the ordinance, is addressing multi-purpose use on county roads. Any other public comment on items not on the agenda? There'll be time for public comment on the item on the agenda when that comes
I
up.
guess mine referred more to a couple of things that were on what's in the second reading, which was the width.
So we'll get there when we get to the agenda.
Sorry.
Yep,
Yeah.
no problem. Any other public comments in the room or online? I do not see any. Right, seeing none, we'll move on to new business. And first on our agenda, we have recognition of Deputy Fitzpatrick and Deputy Polaric for completion of field training officer. And Sheriff Speckman, if you wanna
Yeah, for
come
sure.
lead that.
Yeah, absolutely. They're unable to make it today, but we just had two deputies graduate the field training process, which they started the day that I was appointed back on May 9th as the interim sheriff. So it's a long process. They had to complete multiple steps, different training. So I was just really proud of them that they were able to complete all that. They stuck through it, and they're on the road patrolling our streets now as individual deputies. So just in recognition of them, again, they couldn't make it today because they are working today for shift work. So,
Excellent.
thank you very much.
Very
Thank
good, thank you. All right, and item number 2, we have an update on Assessor Martinez.
Could I just, comment,
Yes,
Sheriff, thank
please.
you for saying that, and also I just wanted to recognize, like, not that long ago, we were beginning to ask, like, what would happen if there were no sheriff's deputies on duty?
Mhm.
Like, which is not a fun question, to have to start thinking through. So I just wanted to really appreciate both your staff, and the deputies who went through that training, but also you and the whole department for getting us to, pretty close to being, at our desired staffing level. That's a huge shift and a huge weight off of us and the community. So thanks.
Thank you for recognizing that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Right. Okay, all right, moving on. Thank you, Sheriff Speckman. Item number 2, an update on Assessor Martinez. We just wanted to provide a brief timeline of events and bring this up, I guess routinely, and let the community know that the office and its existing staff continues to operate and meet deadlines for the state. I want to read through these. What was the expectation of?
What would you?
January through today.
Yeah, just probably
January
just
to today?
Jan, because I think y'all reported previously on efforts, the past issues that have popped up and stuff, and maybe just to give an update as to, since January, what efforts y'all have made to assist Assessor Martinez.
Sure.
I would like to give an update if possible.
Go ahead.
I know that I was asked for a few items and I tried to comply, that I didn't necessarily feel were my obligation, one of those being an
You-
office space.
Mi-
And so
Miguel,
I did find the
Miguel, I'm
office
presuming that's
space.
you. Can you just name yourself for the record, please?
Excuse me?
I'm presuming, Miguel, I recognize your voice. Can you just name yourself for the record?
Oh yeah, Lake County Assessor Miguel Martinez.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to hopefully clarify, or get some clarity to the events as I know them, because ahead of the election, even being the final vote being cast, I was removed from my office. Kayla was in my office, and I had been removed ahead of the polls even closing. So that has not been brought up into your timeline, and I've had no response, or, I have had no due process for any of these removals, and that's my problem. And it's not the first time I've been removed from that office. Yourself, I think, we've had our issues with removal from that office before, for other reasons. So I did find the office space as you requested in an email. I responded to your request in an email to find an office space by finding one. And you told me you would, in that same email, you would negotiate with the owner a lease. I put you in contact with the owner, who was out of the country at that time. He prepared a lease while he was out of the country, had it sent to you through me, and you didn't even contact him to negotiate as promised. A lease, I assumed, is going to start, in negotiation. It's not set in stone from first draft. That's why we have reviews, and you didn't review it or even contact him or contact me. And then further, you asked me to find a deputy and to advertise for a deputy, which I didn't feel like I have to, because I should be able to appoint one like everybody else has in the past, except for myself. I'm getting more special treatment there, and you know, this double burden of proof and none of the qualified immunity you've allowed to all these bad actors in the past. But I did go ahead and go through the advertising process, and I was refused the ability to even review an application. So you continually say I'm not doing my job. You won't let me hire. You won't let me access a budget. You won't provide me any resources. And you remove me from office before even the last vote was cast. Remember, in your timeline, I had to swear in on the lawn before any protection order was put in place. Yes, that's true. Check the timeline. That's why I was on the lawn swearing in before I even took office. You were trying to remove me. So we need to be clear about your timeline, and you know, I just want due process. If you're going to remove me, use the legal due process. Don't settle private beefs with public money.
Okay, thanks, Miguel. Assessor Martinez, I just want to clarify, this is not going to be a public debate, and I will not invite you to comment again. We're just going to go through our outline and responses to your comments. So in response to that, I suppose, the removal from office is not a removal, but a ongoing musical offices that we play in the courtroom, in the courthouse. In fact, Assessor Martinez has more office space than most elected officers. And his office space has been shared, and in his absence, Commissioner Marcella simply sat at his desk in that time. So he was not prevented from using that office. The paper had written a story about this, and we communicated with them. Assessor Martinez wasn't looking for an office space for himself, but in fact appeared to be wanting to relocate the entire office, which was extraordinary expense that was not intended as part of the attempt to find an office space for Miguel Martinez. And it was further outlined to him that our expectation would be for him to resolve the issues with his staff so that everything could function and hopefully get back to some sense of normalcy with his communications with them. He has not been in direct communication with them in quite some time, as far as I understand it. So we have offered a different office space that is meant to be for Assessor Martinez, that is within walking distance of the courthouse, and that should provide him everything he would need to continue his job and communicate with his staff. Let's see. Hiring, Assessor Martinez claimed that he was not able to look at applications in the job description he approved. It required a level of assessor certification, which licensure, which the applicants that came in did not have. So when an applicant does not meet what is in the posted job description, that application is automatically rejected. And so that is through the HR software, which is what had happened there. And as far as access to the budget, this is simply not true. Assessor Martinez can definitely reach out and use his budget, and has been claiming that he needs access to his P card, which has a small limit on that for everybody, because that is not meant to be a routine expense way that you pay routine expenses, apologies, and or make any other huge investments. But we have complied and gotten a new cell phone, a new computer, which was originally is his existing software and hardware, I should say, of his computer was, he denied taking that at the swearing in. And so those have been delivered to him via mail to his given address. And I think that covers everything. Can I open it up for anything I might have missed?
I mean, we have new HR software that all of our directors and elected officials have been trained on with the absence of Assessor Martinez. So some of those things and those nuances are just that we've implemented new processes in the last 2 years since he's not been fully engaged, that we've continued to move forward to build a better organization. And so it's difficult for us to actually work through some of those concerns when there's no effort on the other end. So I mean, we're doing all that we can. We have the communications that we've sent. So, I mean, it's all in writing and we've not gotten a response. So Jeff, I don't know.
I wanted to clarify on the access to budget, just because that can mean different things. I mean, access to the budget information, that's not a public link. There's no way we actually could block accessing like information about what the budget is. In terms of being able to spend it, we have procurement policies that need to be gone through, and we have not moved or blocked any budget from the approved budget. You know, the 2023 budget. So this continued claim of like blocking access to the budget, whether it means like the information or actually being able to properly spend the approved 2023 budget, is just not true.
So where's the office space you're offering that's close by?
Sorry, Ron, we're not engaged. This is not a conversation, really. So this is just our presentation.
I was gonna offer comment on the office stuff if you like. For one thing, the comment about the lease that was proposed and rejected, it was clear based on the terms of the lease, the size of the space and stuff, that Assessor Martinez was attempting to move the assessor's office out of the courthouse, which under Colorado law, it's required to be in a county seat. There's a provision for an additional office to be set up within Lake County if necessary, to allow him to perform his duties. And the commissioners have identified several options for that, which they've communicated to Assessor Martinez, and he has not responded to those offers. So there are options available that will meet the requirements of the permanent restraining order that was entered by the Lake County District Court to allow him to work within Lake County, but yet not infringe on the restraining order that the court put in place. So it's inappropriate to identify what the options are without knowing whether or not, you know, they're something that Assessor Martinez is willing to consider.
Well, I just said, you know,
It's not public comment.
It's not public.
It's not public comment because there's no
Public
lease.
information to know where you guys have an office set up.
We don't have anything set up for him yet because he
You
hasn't
just said there
responded.
was something in walking distance.
Yep.
That's what I'm curious.
That is
Where's
an offer. Ron, this is not time for public comment.
You can make that at the end of the meeting if you like.
All right. I think that covers that. If there's anybody that's anything else.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to say. I mean, we are actively running out of space. There is still a desk in that office across the hall from where the assessor's office sits. It's not an option for Assessor Martinez because of the permanent restraining order. So that is an issue, but you know, I sat at that desk because I had to give up my office space, and that desk was vacant for 2 years. So we are using what we've got. So it is what it is.
All right. Let's move on.
Okay.
All right,
Okay.
thank you. Item number 3, consideration of an emergency fire fund agreement with the state of Colorado. And I'll offer Claire Skeen, our emergency management director, to lead this for us. This is not anything new, but I'll let you give us an overview, please.
Yeah, so Lake County is one of the 42 counties that participates in the Colorado Emergency Fire Fund that's administered by DFPC, the Division of Fire Prevention and Control. We signed a new agreement for this back in 2020. It's a 5-year agreement. It basically acts similar to an insurance policy. Where 42 counties in Colorado pay into a fund managed by DFPC. So if we were to have a large wildfire that became state controlled, or we gave it to the state, we could pull for reimbursement from this fund. We have been making those payments since 1991. The 2023 payment was in y'all's last AP packet, from what I understand. However, as we discovered during a work session with our DFPC Regional Battalion Chief, there was an administrative oversight in the signing of the MOU with the Emergency Fire Fund, and it was missing signatures. So I come to you all today to ask for the approval to, re-ratify?
To essentially ratify it, because since the necessary signatures weren't on the document prior to its recording in 2020, and pursuant to what the state is informed that therefore it's not compliant, it needs to be signed by the sheriff's office now. And so my suggestion would be just to request a motion for y'all to ratify that agreement once Sheriff Speckman is able to sign off on it. And then it'll be submitted to the folks with a cover letter explaining why it's being ratified at this time.
Ratify with the, to ask the sheriff to sign the agreement.
There's also the clerk and the board chair, so I would just say with.
Well, the version that was signed in 2020 was signed by the chair and attested by the clerk and recorded, but it wasn't signed by the sheriff's office.
Got it.
That's why. And so,
Okay.
and since it's not the same sheriff in office now, that's why I would recommend the motion to ratify it and have him sign it this time.
Very good.
And I do also have a cover letter drafted for both you as the chair and Sheriff Speckman to sign to explain that to the city.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, thank you. Okay, well, I will entertain a motion to ratify the memorandum of understanding for participation in the Colorado Emergency Fire Fund to include the current sheriff's signature and be submitted by emergency management to the state with the cover letter of explanation.
So moved.
I'll second.
All right, any further discussion?
None from me, thank you.
I see
Thanks for catching
nothing,
that.
yeah, nothing from the sheriff, no comments. Great. I wouldn't presume any, but yeah. Just kind of a further context in this, and Claire, maybe you want to add to it, but every year with the increasing risk, there's been more and more mutual aid offered in resources and personnel. And so this agreement across the 42 counties continues to evolve and grow because the importance is the suppression of a wildfire conflagration. So
Yeah.
that is much appreciated as we have limited and strained resources in a small rural community, but in general, the overall impact of post-fire is a scary reality. Thank you. All right, hearing no, or is there any further discussion that prompt anything? All right. Hearing no more discussion, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you very much. Sorry, jumping back and forth. All right, item number 4, consideration of a liquor license renewal for La Mina Tacos and Mariscos, led by the county clerk, Tracy Lauritzen.
So this is just a renewal. There's been no comment or issues with it, and all of these are attached. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hearing no issues with the renewal license, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the liquor license renewal for La Mina Tacos and Mariscos.
A second?
All right, any further discussion?
None from me, thank you.
None for me?
Great. Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, thank you very much.
You.
Right, and item number 5, we have an update on our short-term rental moratorium, and I'll ask Ann Schneider, the Director of our Community Planning and Development Department, to give us a brief status update.
Sure. Thank you so much. So what we have done, and I didn't have the PowerPoint, but I know we did it with the board to kind of do an update when we met for our work session, is that we are currently reaching out to all non-compliant. We've gone through legal review with Chris on our correspondence with them. We will be issuing a cease and desist letter to the non-compliant short-term rental. We have provided a method by which they can come into compliance voluntarily and agree to certain conditions, and recognizing a very, very small window to allow for reservations that may be existing, so we don't create a hardship for those customers who have rented the units unbeknownst to them that they are in violation of any kind of regulation. And so it is a very small window, and we've created a methodology that they, or a process, excuse me, that they can come into voluntary compliance. It's a form that they sign, they agree, they provide us information on the status of their listing online, as well as removing it from online, and so they can do a voluntary compliance under the code. And then from there, we will be working to address those issues that need further enforcement if that voluntary process is not adhered to. But the first is trying to reach out in the spirit of education and a pathway to compliance. And if that's not successful, then we will go into an enforcement method. The other areas of concern that we are going to be preparing a Gantt chart similar to the Gantt chart that you now have on OHV, with the lens that we're really wanting to concern ourselves with on short-term rental. First is environmental impact. We are paying very close attention to saturation levels in different areas and whether or not those areas can sustain short-term rentals, specifically on areas that are served by well and septic. Also, we have a concern over fire protection and fire safety, and aligning with our wildfire protection planning, excuse me. And so we really want to look at some key areas already identified at the beginning of this process, and continuing to be areas of concern are the Village of Twin Lakes, Gordon Acres, and Panarch. So the southern portion of our community has had an increase, certainly, in the degree of use. And these are areas that have vulnerable infrastructure and areas that we want to consider what the impacts could potentially be there. The other areas of higher concentration are West Park. This is an area, though, that is on centralized utilities and on the periphery or closer to core services. So we will be really breaking down from an environmental standpoint what kind of impacts they have. We're also going to be looking at community character and culture, as well as an impact on housing. Certainly, this is a statewide, this is a national concern, as well as what the impact of short-term rental is having on our critical housing issues, certainly realized throughout the state. So we do want to be mindful of that as well. We are also looking into, there has been a lot of work around short-term rentals, and we are looking to other communities for lessons learned and codes that may have been successful. You may all remember that we were pioneers in our short-term rental code. We established those regulations in 1997. And we early in within the last 5 years, it is often that we are called upon as a model code that other jurisdictions have looked to replicate. So we were really forward-thinking initially back in 1997 into short-term rentals, but things have changed significantly. The revenue generated from short-term rentals Whereas short-term rentals used to be something that deferred homeownership, now are cash flowing. And so there is also a consideration of the ability maybe for housing stability that could be brought about through short-term rental, or sustainability of existing owner-occupied short-term rentals. However, we are going to dive into potential case law that may not be able to recognize different types of ownership legally. So a lot of work to be done. We most recently discovered that community builders may be a resource in engagement. We will be looking at engaging with consultants to assist and grow our capacity in order to review this. A lot of the work can be done internally, so we'll be very intentional about those engagements because we do have a lot of information. We will also be reviewing where the city is at in their tier system is quite a bit different than the way that the county has licensed in the past. However, we would love to see and do a check-in with the city, see how their regulations are doing. Most recently, they're in have an initiative to do a code amendment to no longer require conditional use permits for short-term rentals and have it in an administrative process. And so we'll just weigh in with them wherever we can overlap on regulations. That's always a benefit for the community. However, the impacts and the housing stock is so, it's very different. So we'll also recognize that our regulations most likely will look a bit different than the cities just because we have just a different environment and housing stock. So we are actively, I would say at this point, we are in the enforcement stage. And then the next we'll be diving into the analysis of where we are today, what potential code modifications might be, and then a presentation. We will also build into this process, just like we are in OHV, time to engage with the community and gain their input and information into how they feel short-term rentals should be regulated within Lake County. So we will also have that built into the Gantt chart, just like we do on the OHV that is brought forward. So happy to answer any questions though about anything.
Thanks, Ann.
Sure.
Is a fair kind of generalization of that timeline, since I think we have the outfitter and guide moratorium and short-term rental moratorium, and maybe the first, while we are pressing to set up further regulations in OHV, we will try to engage to make a smooth and swift process through the short-term rentals after that process, primarily after that, like the
So our
most of
timeline for STR is the end of our moratorium period is prior to the end of the OHV, I believe. Actually, we had 1 year. So maybe
September.
I'm so sorry.
I think it's about
OHV
the
is-
same.
They're about, I think September, October are dates.
Okay,
So they're just a couple weeks apart. You will see, and I don't want to jump too far ahead here, but we are hoping that OHV, we might be able to, our timeline's a little ambitious, but we are hoping to actually be able to maybe bring something to fruition on that ahead of the deadline for the moratorium on OHV. But our Gantt chart right now, I think that we have us ending in July, and we certainly have much more time than that. So it's a little ambitious, but that is kind of setting a high bar and hoping that we might be able to meet it, but knowing that we have that additional time if we need to. Okay.
thanks, Ann.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments on the short-term rental moratorium update?
No, none from me. Thank you.
Just for me, looping back to that resource for fuel mitigations, and that being one of many other concerns from subdivisions that we have heard from HOA members or neighborhood residents on that we should be touching on, but everybody shouldn't hesitate, no one should hesitate to reach out on any of those aspects to learn more. And also just to clarify too that in the existing permitting process, you have very strict regulation in order to assess the septic and on-site wastewater treatment systems. So we continue to do our best
Right.
there with environmental health.
Yes, and I think just to maybe highlight what currently are in the regulations, so we only issue licenses based on what the septic system will allow. So licenses do have an occupancy, a maximum occupancy on them. We also check advertising to make sure that owners are advertising at that occupancy. If they are not, then we reach out through compliance to make sure that they understand. We also have a PSA that we do about, so we provide an acknowledgement that owners need to read through the licensing process that talks about the effects of over maximizing the system, what it can do to their investment as well as the environment. And most recently, based on some concerns that came forward that we absolutely wanted to support, were concerns about the use of outdoor fire pits by renters on short-term rentals. And so we engaged with the Lake County Fire District, and we drafted an informational piece that we sent out to all licensed SDRs and just educated them about the dangers associated with allowing this use and encourage them to really think about potentially prohibiting renters from being able to have any outdoor fire use through their rental agreements. And so we did, we really saw the merit in doing that. It's aligned with the other collective work that's being done. And so we did have an active engagement last year where we sent out direct correspondence to all license holders.
Thanks.
Sure.
Cool. Anything else? Great.
No, I don't know.
All right, on to our last agenda item. We have bills, reports, and payroll. Yep. Items and new, okay. Item number 6, we have our second reading of ordinance 23-01, an ordinance addressing multi-purpose use on Lake County roads. And Ann Schneider, would you start this again for us? And if we have a full outline of an overview and timeline and background on this. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I provided the board with a staff report, and I'm going to start with process update first because I think that is probably the biggest item to address from the start. And that is an acknowledgement, and you will see that the overview and timeline on the website has been updated, but we do need to change the presentation for adoption until April 4th. So today is just staff bringing forward all the information that's contained within the staff report, some additional tools that we're hoping that might help serve public engagement, and just kind of a wealth of information on the topic. So the first thing is there's been a slight change to the timeline. Ordinance 2301 was published in the Herald on 3/16. Per the ordinance process, that publication has to have been in place for 10 days prior to the board acting on the ordinance. So today, staff is hoping to acknowledge that there has been a bit of a change in the timeline. And so the date for adoption and presentation by the staff to the board for adoption has been moved to April 4th. This also allows more time within the process. We have received a wealth of public comment, and I think it allows more time to just engage with the public and for staff to maybe present some tools to outline the scope of work during the moratorium period and just provide a better understanding of the work that's being that the board has commissioned for staff to do in regard to county roadway use for recreational use. So that would be the first, I think, big update on the process. And there have been a couple suggested edits from staff based on some input, based on some input both from the board, from staff's review, from legal, and so that's all culminated into a couple of edits in the ordinance. And so I just wanted to bring those to your attention first. In section 1, under designation of roads, public use, number 6, it called for a local registration and sticker program that has been removed, or is being suggested to be removed. And the reason behind that is to create some time to do some further investigation. There has been suggestion, first of all, it's not a tool that we have developed at a point to administer at this point in our process. So I think that would be the first, is that it's not an available tool. And the second is that staff needs to spend more time and due diligence in researching the potential of doing it. There has been a suggestion that that there could be legal issues surrounding that, and certainly careful consideration wants to be done before that would be brought forward to be entertained by the board. So that is the first edit. The next is in section 2, under designation of roads for commercial use. So under commercial use, number 1, add the language, this was brought forth by one of the operators, that the point A to point B, because the very first item under commercial use is that they will adhere to all the same rules of public use with the addition of some standards. And so the point A to point B is a little clunky for them because their routes are going to be determined either through their conditional use permit or their special use permit. So just an addition to that that says an exception of point A to point B, those routes are determined by conditional use permit or special use permit. So I think that just makes that more, and I thank the operator that brought that to my attention. Thanks, Tim. And number 3, add the size of vehicles and remove number 4. So this is being suggested because the width of the proposed vehicles could be a degree of detail that should be reviewed as part of the CUP or the SUP process. So that would be removing the restriction of the width of the vehicles from number 4 and placing that within a criteria to be considered on a case-by-case basis through the special use permit or the conditional use permit. And then number 5, there was an ask from the board to add winter grooming for that's creating an equitable contribution to winter grooming. I just had said grooming, and so it was just a slight clarification. So those are the items that you will see in the document that I've sent over that has the ordinance revisions that are proposed by staff for your consideration at this time. There are a couple educational or public engagement pieces that staff has drafted for the board to consider. And one of them is what staff has referred to as the why document. The why document to highlight and really say what's driving this work and what is at the heart of the reason behind why the time and energy is being spent from the county. The first goes into, there's a link here. I think that this is a great tool to recognize that this is on the agenda for many, many communities in the state. And so it's on the Stay the Trail website. So there's a link on here that anyone can go and they can look at how all the other communities within the state are looking at this topic, and you can see what the regulations are. And they range in all different areas. Chaffee County, Eagle County, Silverton, they've come in with a more restrictive approach. I mean, Silverton has looked, or I think their outcome of their election was to ban. So they're probably the most restrictive example. Chaffee County has a very intentional road use guide, Eagle County as well. And it just really shows you kind of all over that we are not unique in looking at this subject. It is something that is on the agenda for the majority of counties and cities in the state. So I thought that that was just a really great tool to get everybody kind of on the same page. And then, staff has outlined two, I'm not gonna get into like maybe down in the weeds because I'd really like the board to look at these and make these their own. These are just recommended from staff perspective of why and what's been driving the basis of what staff's review has been. And so the first is just citizen and recreational user group concerns. And that is safety, making sure that public use is consistent with recreational purposes and not uses that would be typical of primary use, primary vehicle use. Nuisances that we've heard from the city and wanting to partner with them and be mindful of their concerns. A request to, and the idea that guiding has been historically and most recently wanting to utilize the East Side Mining District, even though the zoned parcels were prohibited. So, recognizing that we've had this kind of existing conflict of from the zoning and the land, and then looking at it from the lens of how the roadways are utilized, and that coming because guiding and operating wants to use those roadways. And then we also this has come about because of some concerns of impacts to winter trails, and really no clear directions or rules regarding commercial OHV use on roadways. The existing ordinance is completely silent. And so in the land development code or in any of our regulations, I would defer to Chris to confirm this, but when something isn't addressed, it's prohibited. Just because something isn't within the code or the land development code, that means you need to add it in order to make it an allowable use. If it's not present, then we always err on the side that it's prohibited use. And so wanting to make sure that we have clear, understandable and concise regulations, because the existing one only really addresses and promotes public use. So that was one of the clear reasons why the work is being done. And then allow them, the businesses, to have clear direction. I think that there is understandably some anxiety about what these regulations are going to be. And so we really want to land on something that is equitable and transparent and that is easily understood and usable for the commercial community as well. The other reason that staff would say that we wanted to bring this to your attention is the increased degree of interest in new outfitting and guiding in the community, and what kind of impact does that have? This has driven a lot of communities to put regulations in place, and I would suggest that it's much easier to have a plan and be proactive about what we can sustain and what the community wants and needs, versus reacting when we decide that we've already gone beyond what we can sustain as a community. For an example, and to qualify that there is an increased ask, we experienced last summer, within 1 week, 5 new business asks for outfitting and guiding. Calls coming in and wanting to know how to start bringing in new businesses that would impact recreational use on county roads. And so staff is asking the board, how should we address that? Is there room? Is it sustainable to allow a new higher degree of use into the community? And I do believe that existing operators probably would have, are going to be valuable in letting us know what they think, that possibility is as well. And so this is really designed to look at what makes sense in the future. All too often, we find ourselves in planning, or at least in our department, reacting. And so this is just a thoughtful way in hoping to be proactive. This really, the scope of work that's coming up, we've received already some public comment about a real concern that OHV is being banned. And that's not contained within the scope of the work that staff is working on right now. And so we really want to make sure that what we're working on is really known, and that the future scope of work is known. And so That has been reiterated both in what I've referred to with you as the Y document and then the fact sheet. But the scope of work, is to create a road use guide that is a transparent, user-friendly, flexible tool that will add clear direction. And this is something used by many communities. So that everyone knows, everyone's on the same page. If there are areas that are under construction, areas that for some obvious reasons are more of a hazard or are more of a protected area than another, that we can be cognizant of those. Develop the special use guide. This will be a tool to allow commercial users to permit county roadways for operational routes. And I have provided you a draft of that application, and I would love to, you'll see on the Gantt chart, a work session to start really fine tuning that. This will be a time for youth education and opportunity. We will be engaging to find ways to incentivize and educate our youth. That's a real area of concern is underage riders. And enforcement. So I will be reaching out. I've put a timeline in with law enforcement to really make sure that we are supporting them through the regulations and that we can develop tools that support the ordinance. We'll be looking for, I think we've got some other partners that would help us maybe with youth engagement. And so we really want to look at ways to provide more alignment with law enforcement as well as providing opportunity for our local youth. And then the last item of the scope of work is really determining that degree of existing commercial use. This is, right now, we're really in the process of inventorying and having situational awareness of where we're at, and then considering what the future should look like. And what kind of impact that could have, but also considering balance of recreational use in our community and being mindful of that as we look to the future. So that's the Y document. The OHV fact sheet, really just took a lot of the questions or concerns that staff heard in the public comment and really wanted to kind of outline those questions and give concise answers to those. Also, we wanted to make sure that the public knows how to stay informed. And so on the form, you'll see there's a direct link. There'll be a direct link to subscribe to the website so they get those notifications. And so those two forms we would just like to introduce and have your edits on, and then get those on the website right away and be giving out the exact same information to the public whenever they inquire, so they can be informed about what we are working on. The Gantt chart is really kind of designed to outline the scope of work with it's pretty ambitious, but we're hoping to maybe not need all of the time that has been allowed through the moratorium period. The special use permit has been provided. The public comment, we had a lot. I have put it all into one document that I've furnished. What I'd like to do is to get this on viewable by the public on the website so that all public comment can be viewed by the entire community at any time, so that they see the results of that. I did compile it. It seemed like some users went in numerous times, and so I just put all of their comments together. So it's just been put together by their user IDs. And so I have furnished what we have received to date. And then I would propose just putting that, right now, the way that the notification is sent, it just goes to the administrator of the website for all the comments, and I'd like to make that just public, so that we can get that public comment out so that everyone can see it. And then again, within the scope of the work, the one thing I didn't mention within the scope of the work, but is certainly on the Gantt chart, is an opportunity for another listening session before the adoption of the final ordinance, and through, like the special use permit process. We also identified that reaching out to, the stakeholders that would be, participating in the special use permit process is included within, the public engagement piece. So as soon as we fine tune, the special use application, would love to, get that before the current commercial operations and see what kind of questions that they might have from that as well. So just try to kind of put it into a more organized format for you, to kind of see how staff has aligned the work, and then wanted to develop more tools to have better information online for the public, and then tools that our staff at CPD, anytime we get a call in, we're sending out the exact same unified information. So I'm happy to take any thoughts, comments, any questions on anything I might have forgotten.
Any questions or comments for Anne?
Not right now, I don't think. Do you have anything, Jeff?
Just trying, I was trying, like, looking through all the dates on the Gantt chart.
It's
know.
a lot, it's a lot.
I mean, which is great, but there's a lot in there.
There is.
One thing I appreciate that there's that enforcement section, which we haven't really talked about here, but I think that was one thing that came up a lot in the town hall and listening sessions and comments, is sort of that safety in town, and a little bit outside of the exact city boundary on sort of safe driving in town. I guess could you go back to, so with the April 4th date, could you walk us through, like, so what are we deciding or not deciding or voting on today? Then what happens on April 4th?
Sure, so today, absolutely nothing is being brought to you today except for direction to staff, and some input if you want to give it to me now, or if you prefer to provide me some written follow-up on those informational pieces.
Okay.
So today was just really making sure that if there's any outstanding questions, that we've answered those, but not asking for any vote today on anything other than direction to staff. And then on April 4th, however, enough time will have elapsed for the advertisement in the newspaper. And so at that point, if the board feels confident in adopting the ordinance. Now, keep in mind that the ordinance and what we're doing right now is only adding in some commercial standards. We are not just allowing any kind of public use. Public use stays exactly the same. The only thing that we have done is emphasize that
Reference.
emphasize that you don't use the allowance that's been given to recreational vehicles from point A to point B. Doesn't mean retail, doesn't mean grocery store, doesn't mean post office, doesn't mean, so just an emphasis in that. That's the only verbiage that's been added to public use. And then the only addition right now, before we finish the scope of work, is just putting in some guidelines, or some standards, for commercial, because it didn't exist previously. So again, because it didn't exist previously, our legal interpretation is it's prohibited. And so we don't want it prohibited. We don't want commercial use necessarily prohibited. We want to allow for it, and we just want to provide some standards.
Through the special use or CUP process, or conditional use process.
Right, it'll point to those, and that'll allow you to, the county to look at each operation on an individual basis.
Okay, cool.
Just as a point of order, I would note that since it was noticed as a second reading today, that's effectively what's being carried over to April 4th. And so you probably want to have a motion to do that.
I would. I also wonder, though, because we have had some delays in this process and a lot of people have taken time to be here, I would love to propose that we open it up for public comment today, to get that from anyone who's in the room and attending. It looks like we have some hands up online, which we will get to you. But I'd love to go through kind of that public input portion of the process that we had intended to get to today.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
until the fourth, yeah.
Right.
Well, you can still accept public comment on the fourth as well.
Yes,
So this wasn't the last one.
this is not the last opportunity.
Okay,
Okay.
you tell me how you'd like to start and I will. watch online if you prefer.
I- Sure,
Whatever
let's
you
start
wanna
we can start online.
Okay.
And I'll open up, the public input portion. And it looks like Paul Mueller. Please, everyone, please state your name and your address for the record. And, everyone will also have 3 minutes through this portion. Paul, online?
Sorry, can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Yep.
My apologies. So my name is Paul Mueller. I live at 212 East 7th Street. I'm an economist by training, and so I just have a few quick comments on the proceedings here. So first, I wanted to say I really appreciate the tone in which this has been presented, trying to create clear rules and guidelines. That's obviously very important for businesses and communities to function, to know what the rules are, how to follow them, and just to be clear about that. So I applaud that, being proactive about it. The only comment I wanted to offer is, as an economist, as I've gotten to know the area, I moved here last year, it seems like there are areas where poverty is kind of an issue in our area. And poverty is related to how the economy is doing. It's related to growth. It's related to job opportunities. And so to echo some of the comments made very, very early on in this meeting, I just encourage, the commissioners and the staff, as you're thinking about creating these rules, and again, we need rules so that we can live together in a productive, peaceful way. Just to remember that they do add burdens to people trying to figure out what kinds of permits do they need to get, what are they allowed to do, not allowed to do, can they open a business, can they operate? So again, my short comment here would just, again, to encourage you that even if it doesn't seem like certain rules would have an economic effect, just to kind of consider how they build up over time, right? How rules for recreational use on public land is related to rules around short-term rentals, which is related to rules around multi-use permitting on different zoning areas. So that's just kind of my general comment. I don't have objections specifically to the ordinance being passed or being considered, and I'm looking forward to reviewing it. But just wanted to make that comment, as an outsider who's moved here, 9-10 months ago, and as an economist, I just encourage you to kind of keep that in the back of your mind, that certainly we need rules and we need order, but we also need to make sure that we don't make it too costly or difficult for people to start businesses, create jobs, build things, develop areas. And again, we want to do that thoughtfully, in a sustainable way. But those are the extent of my comments. So thank you for your work, and just wanted to comment on that element of passing new ordinances and regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Mayor Lave?
Okay, thank you, commissioners. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Excellent,
Go right
excellent.
ahead.
I just want to say I'm supportive of this draft overall. I do have a few comments and, touched on a few of those. I like the idea of county issued stickers, and I know that's a complicated, heavy lift, and you're probably not ready for that quite yet, but when the time comes, I feel that I would like to support that part of it. I had a problem with number 8, but I think Ann, in section 1, Ann kind of talked about dealing with that in section 2, number 1. So really not, it's probably a non-issue. I also want to say I am also very supportive of the idea that let's say guide and rental operations have to be resident to Lake County. I believe that's an important piece of this. So thank you for that. I would under number 3, section 2, number 3, when the time comes to start deciding what a special use permit might look like and the parameters that might exist there, especially in terms of routes, I would really like for that to be a discussion between the commissioners and the guide operations who are currently in existence. I feel like it's going to be important for them to have a voice in that. So I'll leave it at that. Just a suggestion. The idea that all commercial OHV shall not exceed 50 inch, as you know, and we've discussed, that is the number used by the Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management for single track trails, but not OHV use in general. So I appreciate Ann's suggestion that maybe we should take that out and deal with it in other parts of the ordinance. There's one thing that makes me nervous in section 5, where they talk about penalties. It says to include both guides and customers, and I feel like customers really depend on the guide services to know the law, and that the customers themselves probably shouldn't be held responsible. It's just a thought. And the last thing that I have is, we're going to get into the idea of enforcement. I'm still in favor of starting up some sort of an ambassador program that, of course, would be more educational than enforcement, and I would be glad to be involved in developing such a program. But overall, thank you for what you've done here.
Can I just respond to just one?
Yes,
of those?
please. Thank you, Mayor.
Just one comment back on that, is that the reference to users is the amount of the fine. So it's that the fine is increased, not just for, the fee would be the calculated on a basis of the guide plus each of, so I think the penalty is X per, it's an amount. And so what we're saying is it would be applied kind of degree of use. So that fee would be for the guide, and then additionally added to each of the participants. So it's not a penalty to the participant directly, it would still be a penalty to the company, but it's increased by the degree of use.
Okay,
So
I
I
just
just
added
wanted to-
that on the draft.
Thank you. I can see that I misread that, so thank you, Ann.
No worries, no worries. I just wanted to, because I agree with you, Greg, that would not be very fair.
Okay.
Right, we had Mr. Marsh here first.
Alex Marsh, I'm an attorney here in town at 400 Harrison. I'm here on behalf of the people of Leadville ATV. It's nice to hear earlier from the actual employees, and I think the economist hit on something big too, that we should keep in mind when devising the special use and conditional use permits. The drafts I've seen so far, with a little hyperbole, sort of ask right down to the genotype of the guides. There's a lot of probing information there that might be pretty hard for some people to comply with and remain a viable business. I do appreciate the recognition that the 50-inch regulation is sort of not applicable when we're talking about the use of machines on roads, not on trails. Everyone agrees that we should pay attention to the size of the machines as they're going down trails to prevent erosion, environmental impact, but we're already on roads that have mining dump trucks, Jeeps, like all sorts of traffic that's more frequent and more, potentially more reckless, more dangerous. So 70 inches is like a normal side-by-side, but again, the case-by-case basis seems to be more, well, at least on the surface, more judicial. I know some concern has been made over in the wintertime, side-by-sides with tracks on them, and regular sleds with the inexperienced driver who pushes their throttle might make the track in the snow a little unstable. However, if we're considering the width in the special use or conditional use permit, we did need to distinguish between winter tracks and summer use if that is the legitimate concern. But also on an individual basis, if you've got a turbo side-by-side with non-all-wheel drive, you're gonna get a different track in the snow than if you've got regular sort of laid back, geared down, all-wheel drive side-by-side like my clients I know use. But when it comes to those permits, I think it's important to remember that just like in the ordinance itself, the county has to have a reason for those. And so far it seems that the reasoning adds up, but if the reasoning for the insurance of every vehicle on your lot isn't really apparent other than it's a hurdle, I think that leaves some of this open for individual attacks on denials of permits. So again, taking into consideration the county's stated goal of supporting business and homeownership and local employment, putting those too restrictive as they arguably are now, it should really be problematic, especially if we're just going to enforce the 50-inch thing on the CUP side of things. Lastly, there's a mention of the East Side Mining District. I'd like to remind the community that this was the area that the EPA invented the Superfund site for. And while it sure isn't zoned for use this way, that's the land itself. Land use and zoning is not applicable to the roads themselves. Zoning or conditioning road use is a lot trickier. Typically would involve the state as well. So we don't want to, it seems absurd to end up with a situation where we can't have these OHV companies running their tours through the Eastern Mining District, but we're still having off-road Jeeps rented from Fun For You Rentals in Frisco coming down here and bouncing around over there, just because they've got license plates as opposed to a state license plate as opposed to running afoul of the county zoning on a road. So again, I just want to stress that zoning the road is different than zoning the land, and that could, I see some potential for that to be real problematic for not just commercial users, but also public. That's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Marsh. We'll go online. Ting?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. So Ting, 1 Harrison Avenue, Leadville. My husband, Daniel Conley, as you guys know, owns Leadville ATV Tours. So I just want to make a comment and thanking the commissioners to lift the blanket ban on the weight limit on the side-by-side machines and consider these machines on the case-by-case basis. I really appreciate you guys considering that, and that will really help our business to continuously to run and complying with the new proposed ordinance. In addition to that, I also want to touch on asking the commission to consider how is this new ordinance going to be enforced. And mentioned enforcement is currently in discussion, but currently it just feels like if this ordinance passed, seems like all the local business that's based in city of Leadville and also Lake County will have to comply, which we're totally fine with. My concern is it just with the current structure, especially without the sticker system, it feels like there's no way to actually identify other businesses that's renting machines, allowing their customers to recreate and bring it to Lake County, meaning that there are a lot of rental businesses that rent side-by-side Jeeps, in Buena Vista, in Summit County. A lot of them are coming here to recreate, and feels like there's just no way to actually enforcing this new ordinance on businesses like that. And while we as a local business do everything we can to comply with the proposed ordinance, it just feels like it's not necessarily fair for the businesses that's located in city of Leadville and Lake County, while we're the only one who's going to comply with this ordinance. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ting.
Is there any other public comment?
Oh, Ting, I think Ting registered. Oh, no, we're good. Sorry. Okay. Go ahead.
Ting, were you finished?
Yeah, I
Yep,
think,
I'm on. Thank you.
Okay.
I think I lowered her hand at the same time that she tried to lower
Oh,
her hand, so she
alright.
raised it.
Okay, got it,
Sorry.
got it. We've got gentleman behind you who's stood up. Thank you.
Jason of Mountain Adventures. I guess just to kind of reiterate what Ting said, seems like a lot more thought's gone in here in the last few weeks. And some of the things I'm hearing, I like. I know I've kind of made, I know he's not here today, but maybe, also asking that we kind of are able to come in and actually show you guys what we use rather than just being like, okay, this is what we use or this is what's being used, because all of us use different things. And I think we do that so that we're not stepping on each other's toes. And so I think it would just be nice maybe even to have you guys come see what we use or go over the maps and say, this is actually being used, this is not being used. Hey, maybe we do it over here versus over here. So we're not, ticking off the neighbors, so to say. So I really appreciate all that. I would just like to see that, definitely happen, and some time be made for that. Everything else is, as a business and just about, I ran in Routt County for 7 years. Trust me, we had to comply. And so I can see that, this is something that's definitely needed, and I've told you guys before, I support it. And something more that's on a little bit less of a selfish note, but the A to B thing, an experience with the local this last couple of weeks, fixing his ATV, low income, only way, handicapped to get from point A to point B, back to point A, is his four-wheeler, okay? So we have to be really careful about who we're kind of single out. Yeah, I can see we don't want them all sitting down in front of, the bars on the weekends, right? We don't want to see people ripping around town, going down Main Street, down Highway 91. I get it. But we also need to kind of make a provision or at least have an understanding that some people in town, that's the only way they get around, right? So it's a little bit different for them, right? They don't have a car. So I just kind of wanted to mention that and put that thought in your heads that, that might not be something that's really feasible for some people. And I don't want the sheriff's office or the city police chasing around old timers on their four-wheelers, and giving them tickets when they already don't have, the means really to, pay their bills, a lot of them. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Pete Day, 27 Daisy Drive. I submitted some comments to Ann and to each of you. And, I just wanted to talk about a couple of things. I conceptually support the goals of the ordinance. I thought, the fact that it was based on ordinance 12-02, I think there might be some fundamental flaws in that ordinance too, and how it's drafted, and not being clear and concise. So I'd encourage you, given that there's more time to deal with this, to go back and look at that ordinance and make sure that what you pull into the new one, which is going to replace it, is clear and concise. And I provided some examples. I agree with Mayor Labby. I read it the same way he did, that individuals in a group could be fined. So that's something that deserves some clarification. I put that in my comments as well. I want to talk about point A to point B. That wasn't clear to me. It seems like there was some language included in this draft ordinance about not going to Safeway and things like that, retail stores. But what was taken out of the existing ordinance was that that point B was defined in ordinance 12-02 as a recreation destination within Lake County. That's disappeared. It's now only point A to point B, which doesn't have a lot of meaning to me. Point A to point B is essentially, anywhere to anywhere, as long as you don't go to a retail establishment. So I provided some examples. You know, the golf course is a recreation destination, but do we want golf carts driving on, you know, on county roads? I mentioned that I actually saw that last summer on McGuffey Drive. Or to access, you know, if you're gonna go hike at Timberline Lake, is using an OHV to, you know, to get there. Is that what your intent is? Because that's easily accessible by a, you know, by a regular motor vehicle. So it just needs to be, you know, so point A to point B is very confusing to me on exactly what that means and why the recreation destination language was taken out for this iteration. I don't think that we want county roads to just be locations for, you know, driving, you know, up and down the county roads, you know, without having a purpose. So I presume, maybe incorrectly, that the purpose is, you know, for OHVs to access, you know, trails off a county road, that's the reason for driving on the county road, is to access other trails, not that driving on the county roads is an end unto itself. And let's see, and I guess in general, I just thought that it could be, the ordinance could be more clear, and given that there's extra time to consider this, I urge you to you know, take a hard look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Day.
Hey, my name's Zach. I'm with Leadville ATV Tours as well. Just want to say thank you. Sounds like we're all kind of coming to an understanding here and going in a better direction than it was before. So I really appreciate that. I want to agree with what these guys say. A little more clarification on point A to point B would be a lot of help. And I guess that's about it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Anything else?
Yeah, Donald Vosberg, Leadville. How about a moratorium on guide licenses until this is solved? Our existing guides that have them are okay to operate until this is solved, and then look at if we really have room for any more guides.
That is exactly what is happening.
Yeah, we already have that.
Good idea.
Okay,
Good idea.
but a moratorium so nobody can just slide in the door.
That's what we've actually got in place.
And then on these commercial vehicles, I know it's gonna be a little bit more cost to these guys, but if they have identification, this man's ATVs are operating, if somebody pulls it, does something that's a complaint and calls them in, it says it's his, but there's no identification on the ATV as a commercial ATV. You can't blame him because his shit's marked. Thank you.
So it's Tim Vermeer from High Country Tours. With what he just said, we've got logo stickers on every one of our machines. They have our website and phone number on them. And that is a great idea. That way everybody knows who's who. But with our county roads, they're public roads accessible to the public. The outfitters give people in the public the opportunity to use them that otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity. And I mean, although the exclusivity of granting a few permits allows the operators to have less competition, I don't think it's very American. Quite simply, public use is public use, and everybody in the public has the right to use it. And the roads have a ton of capacity. I mean, obviously, everybody that's out there would like to be the last person who showed up, and there's not room for anyone else. That's kind of the idea we get here in the mountains a little bit. But there is a lot of room up there, and I think a lot of the concerns are for safety and road damage. I think the road damage is caused largely by reckless driving, which is already illegal. It's also caused by speeding, which is already illegal. Two laws that would just need to be enforced. Any road surface has a certain capacity for handling a certain amount of weight. Trucks are limited to 80,000 pounds because if they weigh more than that, they'll damage the road. And each surface, gravel, snow, has its own weight bearing capacity. And the more weight you put on that surface, the more often it's going to need to be maintained. I think every vehicle that's running on these snow surfaces, which largely impacts what we do, I think it's possible for everyone to run in harmony, but it just takes more grooming, of which is expensive. And the more a vehicle weighs, the quicker it breaks up that snow surface. The more volume there is, it breaks up the surface more quickly. And so I think everybody could be harmonious as long as we got groomers running to fix the trails when they need it. And so groomers are expensive. Right now, it's difficult to get the trails groomed as much as they need it. And so I think the equity is a great way to try and address that, but it is a very difficult thing to address because it's a huge bill, and it also revolves around a labor force that is difficult to find. The Snowmobile Club, like Alex is pretty much the main groomer on the east side, and he does his best, but it's a big commitment for him to say he can do it twice a week. And a lot of times he doesn't have time to do it twice a week. And so we go out there, we try and help out when we can, smooth them out when we can. But if there was a good way to address the maintenance issue, I think there's a lot of capacity up there for essentially as many outfitters as people want. But I guess how do you really put a number on this is the amount that's okay and then this is not? It's like when I go to Denver, I would prefer that I wasn't surrounded by cars when I'm stuck in traffic. Is it right for someone to say, well, these cars are okay and these cars are not? It's not. It's a public road. It's open to everyone. And so if you don't want to be there because the traffic is too much, that's the part of it that reduces the amount of use. Like, oh, we don't want to go to the east side because it's just so busy now. And that in itself is the free market saying, this is our capacity. That's all I have. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
I'm Ron Bertolos, 1113 Mountain Drive. I'm assuming you're gonna remove the 50-inch from it because 50 inch is really a hazard. I mean, I've seen people roll over on 50 inchers side by side. They get some damage to the body. And the thing is, in the mountains, 50 inches are no good. If you're down on flat land, yeah, you can get by with a 50 inch. But I've seen 50 inches just come out over on the side and flip over. Definitely is not a good idea.
Could I chime back in on that?
Sure.
Again, that is largely due to operator error and most likely reckless driving. Yeah, they generally don't roll over unless you're sliding sideways. That's it.
Sorry, Ron, are you finished? Okay. Well, I mean, I would love to offer a comment on the 50 inch, as Mr. Hiller said, or was guessing that should have, at the very beginning of the drafting, included just that winter use because of the condition of the groomed trails. And that restriction was a suggestion from the Snowmobile Club to maintain the groomed trails. But as Ann outlined, that addressing that and the conditions of the trails and the impacts of each outfitter based on the equipment used and the volume and the days would be something that would get into more detail through the special use permit. Go ahead.
If I can just add on that, I mean, like the way I've been thinking about it, and I welcome education correction, is, I mean, there's sort of two issues, but I think, especially thinking about the winter use, and, I do think 50 inches is not the right standard. To me, there's two things I care about. One is, chewing up the groomed surface that people are putting time and money into. So figuring out how to, are there vehicles out there that are just too much? And you're never gonna have enough time and money to repair that, like, daily or whatever, so I think there's that issue of like what you're doing to the winter groomed surface and how to fairly share that burden of grooming on the commercially used. And there's also like some of those roads are pretty narrow and like at some width, you can't get to passing, and I've seen people just, gets kind of, you don't realize it, how soft it is on the edge of those trails, and they're pretty steep, so I just am concerned about like at a certain width, but I wouldn't want to try to get around a snowcat coming down some of those narrower county roads in the winter. So I don't know what the right number is, but I do think it's almost like a route by route, vehicle by vehicle type discussion, on those two criteria. But again, just so people know, like at least where my brain is, it's like the 52 inches or 70 inches, it's like for a given width of road and how much use is going on and who's paying for the grooming of it, what are the right vehicles that, are safe and not chewing up the hard work for a lot of people.
Could I chime in again? So with that, you have consideration of what I would call immediate damage. If someone goes on the county roads now that are groomed with their vehicle that has tires, there's immediate damages that cause ruts that are dangerous for pretty much all the rest of the users that are using it. And so that's one consideration, is immediate damage. And the less pounds per square inch that vehicle has on the snow, the less likely that damage is going to occur. And so, obviously, the first time you get a heavy vehicle on that trail, you can't chase it with a groomer and fix it. But we have had times where cars go on our trails, even on the private property, we have people come driving through with their cars and get stuck halfway through. And as the operator in there, we go in there, we drag them out with our snowcat, and then we go fix it immediately, because we're there to do that.
Can I just chime in one more thing? I didn't realize that people were upset about the trails being disrupted by the machines in the snow time and the winter time. I will mention that I used to drive a snowcat for a long time. Whoever drives a snowcat in town looks like, just an inference from what it feels like and with my knowledge and experience on a snowcat, it feels like they just run the tiller a lot. So we don't have a snowcat to use for grooming, which I think we can look into that in the future from our business. But whoever has been running that snowcat seems to just use the tiller. And where I think, Tim, you just said something about where a car comes down and sinks. Yeah, if they make a huge bomb hole, which is what almost every time happens when a car goes up into the east side, they make a huge bomb hole and get stuck, and we help people out a lot just because we can't get through the trail until you move. One thing I'll mention though is that whoever does drive the snowcat up there, because I see one up there from time to time, it seems like they don't use the blade, and if you run just the tiller behind you, it just kind of chews up the snow, but it's really wide. It actually displaces, the high spots will pick that tiller up, and the tiller doesn't just like cut through everything. So you have to use the blade, and if you're blading the whole time, that trail will be dead flat when you're done, and then it sits up. But so whoever's using that, I don't think uses the blade, I think they just till. So there's whoops that go, by the way, it takes a lot of money to run a snowcat, it takes a lot of diesel. I mean, you can run 50 gallons a night through one of those machines, it can be really expensive. So if you're going and you're gonna operate a machine like that and go and groom the trails, whoever's operating that should be informed on how to run the thing. They need to use the blade, because what they're doing is they're tilling, and then they're actually reinforcing the bumps that are already in the ground by tilling over it. They're kind of keeping them there. If you don't blade, you're not cutting anything, and you're not flattening the trails out, you're just kind of making it about 5% better. So whoever's running the snowcat too, if people are worried about the trails and grooming, let's groom properly, whoever's using that grooming out there. And you can fill up all those holes because your blade's the size of this room. So if you're cutting, I'm not talking about taking snow off the trails, I'm talking about cutting it flat, and you'll take off the high spots, and then you'll have a smooth trail system. So if we're wasting our resources, that's not very cool, right? We want to make sure whoever's running that groomer let's do a really good job. Use your blade and the tiller, and then that way you're not just reinforcing, big bumps, because when the snow goes up, or a car goes up into the mountains, I call it a bomb hole. Looks like a big hole in the ground. And if you just kind of run over it with your tiller, you're not actually flattening or doing much at all. And you could go up there once every 2 weeks if you did a really good job grooming, instead of going up there, trying to go up there twice a week and just running your tiller and kind of knocking down the high spots. But actually, when that groomer goes, and it creates a lot of heat with that tiller that cuts through the snow, and when it builds up over those bumps and creates a bunch of heat, it pretty much literally cooks them into solid form once you're done. And then they're just there for the rest of the year. So I don't run the Snowcat up there. If I did, it probably wouldn't need to run it as much. But whoever is running it, again, I don't know who's doing this, and I just wanted to offer my personal input because I've ran one of those things. And if you use the blade, it'll really help out on the tiller side of the thing, and it'll keep the trails flatter, smoother for much longer. Just throwing it out there, guys.
You could reach out to the High Country Snowmobile, High Riders, sorry,
High Riders.
Snowmobile Club. They are
run
always
their
looking
pad
for
if they want to,
volunteers.
We just don't have one, and I would love one, because man, my kidneys just get bounced around here a little bit. So again, I'd be more than happy to help out with that, or even just explain someone a little bit on how to use those things, because there's so much control with them, you can do anything. But if you don't have quite the experience or the skills or whatever it may be, again, maybe just a little tip on how to use that blade and the cut instead of just till the whole time. That's the first thing they teach you, but not everybody gets that, and again, here to help.
Cool, thank you.
I make one more comment, or just a suggestion. Why isn't there any signs at the bottom of this and Center Street in the wintertime that say, no vehicles, don't drive over this giant snowbank? Because every time we come up to the diamond mine up there, there's usually a car or a truck stuck off the left side, buried 4 foot underground.
To put my own sign up.
Like,
Hey, I'm a
can the
local.
county just put a sign up there?
Yeah.
Yes, and
Yes.
that will be part of the process to get signage and also get clear, and our Public Works Director is online too, and he might have some comments, but part of this, up until this point, really with the volume of use that we've seen, the berms and Public Works does very deliberate things, which is part of the reason that is included in this ordinance of nobody is authorized to do maintenance on these roads, because the berms are very deliberate, and that prevents motorized wheeled vehicles from going on and getting stuck.
I mean, at the beginning of the season, we had a 92-year-old man drive his car up and over that berm, drive down one of those super narrow trails and get stuck and had to walk back to town, and then asked us to come help him out. And we did. We went and helped him out of there. But it's like, there shouldn't be a 92-year-old man up here in the first place. There needs to be a sign somewhere.
Yeah.
So just a thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Better signage will be a result of this process.
Again, just with volume, and like Tim said, the heavier the vehicle, the more it's gonna take maintenance. And that's just all there is to it. The tracked vehicles do make a certain amount of bumps. They do make a divot into the ground, a little bit more than a snowmobile, although over time a snowmobile will do the same thing. But it boils down to maintenance. Out at Turquoise, we got snowmobile club, 1-2 days a week, got me 1-2 days a week. On our private property, I'll groom twice a month up there, okay? Because the volume gets cut down, right? From around the lake to onto the private. Right, so it does boil down to maintenance. They are expensive, I know, because I own one. I know how much it costs to run. Been running for 25 years. Okay, they're expensive. But if you want to run a business and you want to run nice trails and you want to have the community on nice trails as well, because we're the ones up there beating them up, really. The locals, not so much. Okay, yeah, they go snowmobile, they go hang out up there. But large amounts of heavier vehicles on the snow require more maintenance, period. And that's why we pulled ours out of there this year, because I could see the damage that it was doing, and I didn't want to add to it. We can do plenty of snowmobiling out at the lake. I can control the maintenance of it from the snowmobile club, who doesn't have an endless budget, right? When it gets a little beat up out there, okay, we jump in, we make sure it's good. So yeah, it's gonna boil down to the maintenance, the usage. Yeah, you can use it as much as you want, right? But you gotta maintain it as well.
And for further context, just for anyone who isn't aware in the room, the Snowmobile Club does have none of our agreements are as formal as we would like to see, but does have an agreement with the county to groom all of the roads in the areas that it does groom. We will improve that, but also part of what I would anticipate our special use permitting process being, which would probably include numerous work sessions. I would expect probably that the board and staff would have conversations, maybe the board staff and law enforcement, both with city and county, would have another conversation to address looking at roads, looking at the enforcement and the issues, and kind of having those conversations, but certainly then following with conversations with you all and the public to incorporate that. But those special use permit criteria would include some sort of mitigation of those impacts, which is not necessarily and probably not ideally having every operator have a snowcat, but really to mitigate with financial contributions to the existing operators and the club that produces that kind of groomed facility for the community to enjoy. So yes, just trying to echo and enhance your comment, Jason. You know, everybody needs to be contributing to some extent to get more consistent and regular grooming, depending on the impacts that are being had out there.
Yeah. Tracy Loretton, 609 7th Street. I'd just like to comment. Let's remember that there's some non-motorized people that do use his trails. So when you talk about capacity, you scare me a little bit, because we would like to have a good experience while we're out there. And I don't mean that we haven't up to now, because you've all been incredibly polite and slow down when you're passing us and stuff, but I'm not hearing anything about non-motorized use, so I just like to throw that in there.
If I could
Go
chime
ahead,
in on that. I think I was probably the first one to actually start running those trails about 20 years ago. And when I started, there was no one there because it was just all fluffy snow, and no one wanted to go trouncing through the fluffy snow. And so when we started grooming it, we started running snowmobiles over it regular and packing it down, we got a lot of thank yous because, oh, all of a sudden everyone can go out there and actually be able to move around. A lot of people don't realize it, but the snowmobiling and the motorized use pays for 100% of those trails getting packed out. Without it, they would just basically, would you want to go recreate 4 feet of snow? That's the question.
I have broken trail up there, but
Right.
yes.
It's not nearly as enjoyable unless you're truly a hardcore athlete.
No, and you guys have been great. I'm not complaining about that whatsoever. I'm just, the thought of no
Yeah.
limits on capacity scares me.
And my only problem with that is, who do you decide to discriminate against?
Well, that's
Who's
what
the group that you
compromise.
say, well, you're not welcome because we're full? You know, it's public land.
I appreciate that comment, Tracy, and I do appreciate your perspective, Tim, but I do think that, you know, I mean, it is not unlike, there's user conflict, there's safety issues, there's environmental issues, and there's just user experience and local residents' experience, and limiting, I would imagine a limitation on the users, at least not to expand outside of current outfitter and guides. And it's not unlike river licenses or angler licenses that are permitted along the river. So it's not something unique that it will be included in our
Yeah,
conversation.
I understand, like, it happens everywhere. It's just, yeah, how do you decide who does and doesn't get to do it? You know, like, if I was born 20 years before I wish I was operating in the place that Good Times Adventures is right in Breckenridge. But since I was born too late, there was no opportunity for me to operate in that area. And so I was discriminated against simply because of when I was born. Someone older than me, born before me, capitalized on that opportunity, and the government said, this is it, we're not letting anybody else do it. And I just don't see how that's fair, but that's a difficult thing to mitigate.
Just one last time, I would absolutely agree with you. And everyone has their different opinion of it as an outfitter. And everyone has, their needs to make money to pay their employees, how many employees and all that. But when we started here, we were the first UTV company. And my intention was to always be small, always have real impact. And always, when we met on the trail, have 30 seconds of interaction with someone who was hiking, biking, skiing, or anything like that. Anything over that, I can understand why a non-motorized user would be upset, so there has to be a compromise there, like you said. There has to be a point where it's like, okay, I know, there's a bumper sticker that says, yeah, we're closed, right? You can't necessarily close things, but because of the community that we are in, and because there's so many non-motorized amongst the motorized, you have to find a compromise there. So that people, if I'm just out walking my dog and 52 snowmobiles go rolling by, and I'm a non-motorized person, I could understand absolutely why they'd be upset, So there has to be a number you can find where you can still run a business, you can still be viable, you can still show people from outside the community a great experience, but you don't have to ruin it for the rest of us, or the rest of the people, that don't see it that way.
I definitely appreciate the conversation, the comments. I think everybody does, and I might ask Sheriff Speckman if he would speak a little bit on enforcement and what those future conversations might look like, and also open up to if Michael Irwin has any comments from the Public Works side of things. And while you maybe marinate on that for just a second, I do want to acknowledge that I think some clarity in the language is definitely something we'll work on. I have been referencing Chaffey County's ordinance. I know we've been referencing several of them, and that again primarily does designation of the roads, and then that special use permitting process will be other conversations where we'll get into details of any kind of regulations and expectations of all the outfitters and guides particularly. Let's see. I think that is, and the point A to point B is, that's definitely heard, I think. And probably we'll look at that more closely before that draft is put out for consideration on the 4th.
I will say on the point A to point B, we've spent a lot of time, and I think that we've come, I would just want to make sure that it's known that that's not something that we are hoping will remain in the ordinance after the work. The really intentional work of Michael with Public Works and making our road use guide. So to, Peter, to your comment, that is definitely, there's a very intentional effort that we're bringing forth that we can get, our hope is that we get rid of point A to B altogether, and that it is much clearer and better defined through the road use guide. And so the only reason that it's staying, much to, I think everyone, we all agree, I think universally, that it's very clunky, and it is not the best clear direction that's needed. It's just that we have determined that it's going to take us a period of time, and that we don't have that in place in time for this iteration. So it's not ever proposed to remain. And so I just want to make sure that that's, the expectation and the deliverable would be that we come out with a very clear roadway use guide that we no longer have to make these kind of references. It is a leftover from the previous ordinance. The other reason that we didn't have recreational destination is because there was a consensus from the board previously, which may change, that we didn't have that defined. What is the recreational destination? How do you define that? Use the example is the golf course a recreational destination? Is a trailhead a recreational destination? What is the recreational destination? And so we were trying to, at this iteration, add in commercial use, which was prohibited previously, and do as little, editing until we have a more clear direction. And so it would be absolutely, it's still a work in progress, I guess I would say.
Sheriff? Oh, Pete.
Go ahead. Yeah, I appreciate that. I would just say that in addition to, the specifics on, which roads, can be used, that there also needs to be some, intent statement. What's the goal of using county road? That I just encourage that to be considered as well.
Sure.
So I appreciate the conversation here for, the commissioners willing to hear everybody and everything that's important to the community, businesses and whatnot. From an enforcement standpoint, just from our office, primary for us is education. And I think the users in this group aren't the violators of those laws. For us, priority two is safety. So when it comes to any sort of safety, life or limb that's out there, that's where we would have to take some sort of action. Education first, and then if education is not working, then we'll have to go about the enforcement side of things. So I think it's as simple from our office as that standpoint, is making sure the community stays safe, not just from who's operating these vehicles, but then also just the community at large. And that's what we take it as our important steps. I'd be happy to answer your questions too. Anybody got anything specific to us?
I wondered if you might have just a kind of general comment on the model traffic code and like general use and also including, state highway prohibition of certain vehicles.
Yeah, so from the model traffic code does model the Title 42 from CRS, so there's just a lot of things that line up there. If your question is specific to the operation of OHVs on state highways, the regulations aren't really put in place on, what tires they're using, the exhaust, any sort of, there's certain standards that are set in place there that I think would have to be looked at as a statewide level before we adopted anything too crazy outside of, just like getting to and from. So I think that's more of a statewide question to see if, those types of vehicles can be operated on a daily basis for transportation.
Michael, from Public Works, do you have any comments to contribute at the moment?
I don't have any right now. There's a lot to look at still, so I think.
Okay, thank you. All right, I don't see last call for public comments at this point. And again, there'll be another opportunity on the 4th and further public engagement opportunity through the special use permitting process.
Okay. So I will make a motion that we continue the second reading of, ordinance 23-01 to April 4th, regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners.
I'll second.
All right, is there any further discussion?
None for me, thank you.
All right.
Thanks for everyone for the good comments.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for listening, y'all.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
All right.
So I would just ask if you could look at the Y and the
Do we need
X
to vote on
document.
that?
Yeah, hold on, I was just taking comments on or discussion on the.
I was just asking if you could look at those documents and get any edits so that we could, in this 2-week period, we could get them up online.
The Y and the, which one?
The FAQ.
Okay.
Okay, will do.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What? Okay, yes, we do.
No, it's okay. You're good.
I did, I stepped right over that motion. I'm sorry.
So Tammy's saying we shouldn't email you repeatedly asking where they are.
You can search my name. You'll try to do faster than me sending it.
So the why and the FAQ, but also, are we gonna try to clean up the ordinance language, to post it again? Not publish it, but, or
Yeah, I guess,
presenting
well, I
that.
guess if you wanna give me, direction on if you approve the edits, and then I'll repost.
Okay,
Okay.
okay. Sounds good. Any other discussion?
None for me, thank you.
All right, hearing none, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Okay,
Great. We'll
all right,
move
thank you.
on to our reports, minutes, bills, and payroll. So we have bills and payroll for pay period ending March 3rd, 2023.
I'll make a motion that we approve bills and payroll for pay period ending March 3rd, 2023.
Second?
Any further discussion?
No, thank you.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, and then veterans report for January 23rd and February 23rd, 2023.
I'll make a motion that we approve the veteran service report for January and February 2023.
Second?
Any further discussion?
None for me.
All right, hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Excellent. All right, and that concludes our meeting at 1:03. We will adjourn.
Thank you.